Now, not all cattails are equal. They're not all the same. There's different sub-varieties of cattail. They're all Typha or cattail, but there's things like narrow-leaf cattail, common or broadleaf cattail, and then even smaller subsections depending on which region you're in. Not all of them are perfect. Some of them have cattail heads, which means that they're most likely fertile, especially these ones that have obviously gone brown and they're getting ready to go to seed, whereas others don't have a cattail head. And because they don't have a cattail head, we can assume that they're sterile or they don't produce one this year. These ones that don't have any stem are mostly leaf. If you look back here, these ones are quite tall. This one's taller than I am, but probably about 7.5, 8 feet tall. And back here, there's only 4-foot tall ones. They're shorter than I am. Depending on where you are, even in the same marsh, different varieties can appear. It's just the way it is. Now, these leafless ones are the most useful to us because the cattail head and stem kind of takes up the bulk of this one, whereas the leaves take up the bulk of this one. These ones are more useful to us for weaving and all the other little projects we got to get done. Now, narrow leaf cattail, if I reach over here, there's a pretty thin one. Often the leaf is not any wider than your thumb. They don't get much wider than that, usually about the same width as your pinky or your little finger. And they are a little bit spikier. They come out to a little bit higher of a point, whereas the broadleaf or the common cattail doesn't. It still has a point, but not as sharp as that one. Usually a little bit rounder on that. These ones aren't as useful as the common or broadleaf ones, simply because they don't have the same amount of bulk inside the leaf. However, they still have some value to us. We can use them for the weaving portions where we're doing the real thin detail work, such as on a cattail duck or a cattail doll. So we can still make use of these, we just have to harvest them. And that's the next step once you find your cattail patch. There's a lot of different tools you can use to harvest the cattail leaves. If you're in a situation where all you have is stone technology, taking a piece of shoulder blade from a deer and simply cutting notches into it to make it like a sawtooth will do the job fairly well. If you are in a setting where you're out here with just a knife, you know what? Your knife can do the job. You're going to get a little wetter because you got to step into the marsh more to get to it all. If you have a machete or a bill hook or anything in that line, they're fairly good. You can reach out and slice and chop and pull the material back to you with that hook on the end when it comes down to bill hooks and brush hooks like this. What I really do suggest is using a saw. You're already going to be using it for a lot of other things, such as cutting wood or even cutting up bone on an animal, but you can also use it for cutting cattail. It's not going to be the cleanest cut, but it's fairly efficient at removing and slicing and cutting through the material in bulk. If you don't carry one of these, or you're trying to keep your prices slim, you can go to a dollar store and pick up a drywall saw and it'll do the job very well. It's also good for grasses and other thatching material. Another tool option when it comes down to harvesting these materials is a grass knife, also known as a sickle. You can grab a big bundle of them together and rock it across them and slice them all very quickly. The bulk of the cattails I've harvested today, I used this to do so. Obviously this only has a few options in the woods and a few uses. So when you're thinking about going out and only carrying a few items, this might not be the item you want to bring with you so much as a knife or a saw or a machete. But it works very well. It's made for cutting thatch. It's made for cutting long material. It's fibrous. It does the job very well. The trick is you don't hack and slash with it like you see in a horror movie, because it's going to dig that tip right into your leg or right into your hand. So you don't want to be playing with that too much, so much as moving it back and forth in a circular motion around the material that you've grasped. And because it's got this long curved blade that's got a recurve to it, or a concave shape, that slicing motion rather than a hacking motion is extremely efficient. It does the job very well. But again, you know, packing this in with everything else you're bringing with you, it might not be the best choice. In that case, we go back to a saw, a belt knife, or a machete. So we have a decent sized but small bundle of cattail leaves. We're going to take one of these stalks and we're going to use it to bind everything for transport, because we got to get it out of this spot and take it over to an open meadow where we can let it dry out for a few weeks. Well, for a few days. So I'm going to take this thick end, tuck it under, everything here. And then I'm going to twist this end to give it a little bit more strength and support. Again, if we shredded these leaves like we did in the first video, it's even easier. But this is okay. And then what I do is I take that narrow end, I bundle it over, holding that tight, well, as tight as it can get without ripping. Tuck that in. And we've got a simple slip knot that when everything's dried out, we moved it, it's ready to go. So that bundle, it'll hold together long enough for me to transport it or store it away somewhere. Let's get going. Well, this is not too bad of a bundle. Got a few more to bring back with me. Now what I was using to carry this is a tump line. This one was made by my friend Nick from Black Thunder Studios. And it was done in the traditional Eastern Woodland style of finger weaving. It's a fantastic item that was used by almost every First Nation between the Eastern Coast and the West Coast in one form or another. This style specifically from the Great Lakes Eastern Woodlands region. Basically the beauty of this is you can put a big bundle or load of gear right on the top of your head near the forehead, and it carries a lot of the weight right on your neck, which brings it right down your spine, making it very, very comfortable. Though it takes a little bit of getting used to and figuring out how to work this thing right. It's very comfortable. It was used also by the settlers such as the Voyageurs, the Courrier de Bois, and other nations of travelers and explorers that came into Canada. But for us, it's really useful because it helps hold the bundle nice and neat, nice and tight, and even if it's a heavy load of cattails, 4 or 5 times this size, no problem. I can carry it back here fairly comfortably. I brought this in for about half a kilometer without any strain to my neck. I brought it to this meadow here specifically so I can let the cattails dry, but not in a bundle. They're not going to dry very well in a bundle. With a lot of plants such as bergamot or goldenrod, you'll see people bundle the ends and hang them up along the rafters of a roof, along a windowsill, things like that. But for us to dry the cattail properly and get it to the nice proper stage we want to spread it out so a lot of sunlight can get to it. So drying it in the woods, not so easy. If you have a nice open meadow that's got a lot of longer material that can help hold the cattails in place during a strong wind, you're in a good situation. And that's what I have right here. So I'm going to untie my tump line. You can see these tails on the tump line are fairly long. That's so you can put big loads of gear on one bundle. Pull it out of the way. Roll it up or fold it up. Set it aside. I also have that little tie off that we did earlier. Undo that slip knot. Untie it. And even this, even though it's been crinkled up and beaten now, it can still dry and be of use later. Now I take the cattail and I just spread it out evenly to one layer in the sun. Now, if you don't have a meadow like this and you have only your home to work from, you can take bundles like this, tie them up, and put them loosely into a burlap sack and hang that burlap sack up. And that keeps them from getting all over the place, but also gives them enough room to move and air to get to them. And if you can put them near a window to help them brown out so they get to this color, that's perfect. Because we're gonna let this dry for about, 5 days. We could do it probably in 2 if we had a lot of sunlight, but we're coming into the end of August, into the beginning of September, so we're gonna be seeing a lot more cloud cover. So 5 days should do it. If it's really cloudy and cool, it might take us a week and a half. It comes down to how long it takes just by temperatures and sunlight availability. And it's gonna dry it out and brown it out, and then we're gonna bundle it all up again and use it as is. Now, if we have the chance to do it in the morning for the sewing of the cattail mats and the weaving of the dolls and the weaving of the duck decoys, the dew that is found on the grass in the meadow here will be enough to dampen this material. So if we start in the morning, early in the morning, we can get this stuff sewn and moved and weaved without having to ever soak it in water. That makes it a lot easier, but we have to let it dry first before we do so. Just like bark material, plant fibers shrink the most the first time they dry. So we have to let this stuff shrink before we dampen it and weave with it so that we don't worry about it, the product suddenly becoming loose and shifted and shrunken and looking deformed because we wove it when it was green. We have to let it dry first. So that's what we're going to do now. We'll come back here in about 5 days. So the cattail's been out here for 6 days now. It's dried out. The leaves have shrunken down. They're not as succulent as they were when they're full of water. They've also turned to a brown color. There's still some that have a bit of a green tone to them, but that's okay. That's just fine. They'll fade over time. And what we do now is we bundle it all up and we take it off to whenever we need to use it. And when we do need to use it, we just get it a little damp and then start working. With this now dry, we can make a lot of different projects. We can get cattail duck decoys, we can make dolls, we can make rope, we can make mats to cover roofs or make onto flooring. We can also make sandals and a lot of other different projects. So this stuff is very valuable, but the first thing you have to do is harvest it and dry it before you use it. Don't harvest it right then and use it right then. Let it dry first, get it damp, and then work from it from there. So now we're ready to make a lot more projects in the future.